Hello, welcome to yet another episode of my travels in France and Spain. Today we're in the south of France, in the Occitan region, and we're going to be visiting the medieval walled city of Carcassonne. The first stone city on this site was the Roman city of Carcassonne. This was taken over by the Visigoths in the 450s. The surrounding Visigothic kingdom fell to the Muslims before the Muslims in turn were driven back by the Carolingians, and then the city became the medieval town that you see today. The city during the Middle Ages was under the control of local lords, fighting at various times against the Count of Barcelona and the Count of Toulouse, before eventually falling to the King of France. The French kings, King Louis IX and Philip III, built these outer ramparts which you can see here. It might seem strange today, looking at this beautiful town, to realise that in 1849 a rapidly industrialising France was considering pulling down these walls. It was only due to a campaign and the work of the famed architect Viollet le Duc that led to the city being saved so that we can see it in this form today. In the distance on the left you can see some towers with slightly flatter roofs. These, I believe, are the original Roman towers, which are some of the oldest parts of the structure that remain. Building on these Roman installations, the medieval masons came up with extensive renovations, including these crenellations and arrow-slit holes, enabling for easy defence of the keep. The main thing the city has to defend itself from these days, however, is the hordes of hungry tourists which flock through the streets. There are extensive number of restaurants and other defensive outposts to satiate their appetites. The majority of the restaurants are housed in buildings dating back to the medieval period, and if you just squint slightly and close your eyes and forget about the seas of tourists swanning around, you could imagine that this is very much how the centre of the town would have looked as far back as, say, 600 or so years ago. Just ahead you can see the Chateau Comtal, the residence of the local lords. Ah, that must be the chateau.
Yeah.
We'll look around this building later, although just to warn you in advance, the inside have been extensively damaged by time and by the iconoclasts of the French Revolution. We'll shortly be coming to the basilica of St. Lazarius and Celsus, which is effectively the cathedral of this medieval town. This beautiful Gothic building, built to replace earlier Visigothic and Carolingian structures, towers over the surrounding hotel. The central stained glass window here dates back to 1280 and is one of the oldest to be found in the south of France. But for me, the true delight of this building, you'll see in just a minute, which is this wonderful rose window up here near the top of the cathedral. It's like something out of a fairy tale. I'm now going to give you a closer look at the arrow slits. You can see here the intention of the windows is to minimize the external area that's exposed for the enemy filing inwards, and to maximise the outside area so that the archer can aim his bow in whichever direction he wants.
I can take a picture of it before
He might live here, you never know. It might actually be his castle.
Betty Lupin of Carcassonne. Maybe. Betty Lupin is the king of Carcassonne.
After a quick chat about Petty Lupin, the small dog that looks similar to my girlfriend's dog we found in the castle, we've decided to head around towards the back of the castle. This part seems to be the steepest and has the best views out over the modern town down in the valley below. The vast majority of the 50,000 people who live in the town today live down there rather than here in the walled city, which is more of a tourist trap.
Probably as close as you're gonna get, right? It's like...
It's not quite really, it's still less than Lupin. I'm surprised they don't have like a Harry Potter kind of convention. I'm surprised there isn't an actual Harry Potter experience, like not a theme park, but an actual holiday experience where you can go to Hogwarts.
This building here is the back of the chateau, which we saw earlier. I mentioned before that ultimately it was the kings of France who took control of Carcassonne from the local lords, but I've not mentioned how that happened. This was during one of the darkest times of Carcassonne's history, known as the Albigensian Crusade. The crusade started in 1208 when papal legate Pierre de Castelnau was murdered after a falling out with the Count of Toulouse. The Pope was infuriated by this and declared a crusade against the Count of Toulouse, the local lords of Languedoc, and the heretics who sheltered members of the Cathar sect. He promised that any lands conquered from the heretics would be permitted to be transferred to the conquerors, and this of course created a great incentive for the crusade. One of the first actions of the Crusaders was to besiege the nearby town of Béziers in 1209. To give you an idea of the brutality, the crusading commander was asked how to tell the difference between Catholics and heretical Cathars by his troops. His reply was simple: kill them all, God will own his own. 20,000 souls were put to the sword that day. The siege at Béziers was followed by the siege of Carcassonne, which only held out for 15 days. The city's water was cut, and the local lord was killed, suspected to be by poison. A few years after this, the King of France took direct control of the land which had previously belonged to his nominal underlings. It's now time to head inside the Chateau Comtel and its surrounding battlements. As I mentioned earlier, this was the regional lord's palace, and one of the most heavily defended parts of the town. Looking up some of these towers, you can see wooden construction. These were known as hoardings and ran around the outside of the tower, extending the area that defenders could fire down on the enemy from. We're at one of the highest points of the chateau, and if you look straight down to the right you'll see an incredible view. Unfortunately, I've not got a great head for heights like this. If you look through the window here, you'll be able to see what the hoarding looks like from the outside, that defensive wooden platform. Sculptures damaged by time and by the French Revolution stored inside the chateau. Many of these are of a religious nature and are parts of old chapels. There is some of the remaining castle chapel visible today, which you'll see in just a second. This room with its fading wall paintings is all that's left of the medieval chapel, although you do have this remarkable view into the town below. And that about wraps up our trip to Carcassonne. It's now time to head on to our next destination of Lyon before heading back to the UK. As I watch the last of the red earth and the cypress trees of the Mediterranean roll away, I can't help but think this is a wonderful part of the world and look forward to coming back soon. Fortunately, we didn't have enough time to explore Lyon properly, but I do have a few clips from an earlier visit available on this channel. We did, however, manage to find a remarkably good breakfast in the hotel. After about 5 hours of train journey later, from Lyon Part 2 through to Paris Gare du Nord, and finally, from here, on to London St Pancras, we at last make it back to Blighty. Hope you've enjoyed watching, and see you soon.